All right, Shavuos, good morning. Good morning. It is a great Shevuos, Baruch Hashem, to be able to begin Wednesday morning together, learning our beautiful Daf Gemara. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this year as a zechus for Besaros Tavos for Am Yisrael. Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Haba Aleinu L'Tova, Shmuel and Rabbi Karapkin, and creation of the yard site of Shmuel's father, Lipa Ben Yecheskel, HaKohen Zichron Lebrach. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, in the Shama Sabin Aliyah, the families, Eid Nechama, all those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Choli Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu Shalom Yiraseh Hashem, bring home all of our hostages, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol Amasei Yedehem. But with that, let us begin. I am not exaggerating when I say that we have a ridiculously amazing daf ahead of us today. It has anything and everything you could want out of a blot of Gemara. There's Lumdus, there's inspiration, there's Halacha, there's Hashkafa, there's Yom Kippur, there's everything you want. Everything you want. So just take a deep breath, take a big swig of coffee, because Emir Hashem, the ride is going to be absolutely riveting, amazing, inspirational, and uplifting. So I'll say with that, today's daf is Yud Gimel 13. We are picking up on Yud Beis Amud Beis 12b at the two dots. Pretty much like the middle of the page, right? Yeah. Va'azadon tumas mikdash. Good. Excellent. Va'azadon tumas mikdash v'kadashav sir hanaseh bifnim. So remember again, we're now making our way actually towards the end of the Mishnah, right? Because remember, so far we've only had one Mishnah, Masechah Shevuos. I mean, it was a big Mishnah. It was pretty much a one blot Mishnah. But we're making our way towards the end of that particular Mishnah. And over here, the Mishnah said as follows. The Mishnah said, Al Zodon. We're not talking Azodon Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav Sir Nasa B'fnim. So remember again, up until now, when we've been speaking about the Seirim, all of the Seirim, remember again, which Seirim have we had? We have a lot of goats everywhere. We have the Seir of Rosh Chodesh, we have the Seir of Regalim, and also the Seir of Yom Kippur, right? But again, specifically Rosh Chodesh and the Regalim, those goat offerings atone for what we call Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav, which means either you're entering into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of Tumah, you're consuming consecrated items in a state of Tumah. What was the commonality, however, amongst all of those experiences? There is some element of shogeg. Whether there's shogeg on the front end, shogeg on the back end. In other words, I didn't know that I was tamei, and then I realized afterwards, I knew that I was tamei, but I forgot. Now we come to a more severe case. What about intentionality? Intentionality, what we call Zadon Mikdash V'Kadashav. I knew I was tamei, but even though I knew I was tamei the whole time, I still entered into the Beis HaMikdash. I still ate kachim. See, even for such an infraction, there is still kapara. Where does that kapara come? So that's what we're talking about over here. Azadon tumas mikdash v'kadashav, where there is intentionality to enter into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of tumah or to consume kachim in a state of tumah. Siyar nasa b'fnim. That is the goat, the inner goat of Yom Kippur, that atones. So the Gemara says, Minhani Mili, from where do we know this? The Tan Rabbanon, because the pasuk says, V'chiper ala kodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael. The pasuk says that literally again, V'chiper ala kodesh, that it'll atone on the kodesh for all of the tumos of Klal Yisrael. Now, both say, now the Gemara doesn't quote the rest of the pasuk, which is exactly what we need. Then it says, Umi pishehem l'chol chatasam. It will take care of their psha'im. We're going to discuss that in just a moment. Psha'im l'chol chatasam, for all of their sins, for all of their chatas. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? Here we go. Psha'im elu hamiradim. So I'll say, so remember again, what do psha'im mean? Now in the world of sin, this is good to know, not for yourselves, or maybe you have a friend, right? In the world of sin, there are different types of averos. So there's what's called a pesha. A pesha means a sin, intentional sin. Intentional sin. I have every intention to sin. So pshaim elam radim. Now, interestingly enough, a pesha is a type of sin that's there actually with the intention to rebel against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Pesha is considered to be the most severe form of sin, intentionality with the intent ultimately to rebel against the authority of Hashem. So that's just about six. So the pasuk says, "V'chiper al kodesh mitumos b'nei Yisrael umi pishehem." So what does pesha refer to? Pesha refers to Mezid. V'chinu omer melech Moav pasha bi v'omer az ti pasha livna be'esahi. Chatos. What are chatos? Elu hashkagas. This refers to accidental averos. A shogeg. V'chinu omer nefesh kitechata bishkaga. So what do you see from here? You see from here that the seir, the inner goat of Yom Kippur atones even for psha'im, even ultimately again for intentional averos. I will say this is incredibly important because right when we say vidui. So remember again, depending on what nusach you daven determines how often you say vidui. Right? So in certain nuschos, again we're saying vidui every single day. Everyone else Yom Kippur, right? Certainly Aseret Mitzvah. What do we say? Chatasi avisi pashati, chet, shogeg, avon, intentional avera, but with the intentionality for benefit. I'm just doing it for my pleasure purposes. Pesha is an intentional avera with the intention to rebel against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Good, so let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Al Shar Avera Shabbatorah, Kalos HaChamuros HaZonos VaHashkagos. Well, so now we come to something very interesting, and this is going to open up the door for a beautiful and incredible sugya. So this is really the end of the Mishnah. So the end of the Mishnah then says, Al Shar Avera Shabbatorah, for all other averos in the Torah. Now, what does it mean? It says all other averos in the Torah. Kalos Chamuros, Zidonos Shkagos. So lighter averos, more intense averos, intentional, unintentional, hoda, velo hoda, I knew about it, I didn't know about it, asay velo sasay, positive commandments, prohibitions, krisos, umisos, bezdin, kares, I'm just reading from the Mishnah now, seir hamishtalech mechaper. So essentially, fascinatingly enough, in halacha, there is a catch-all kapara. What's the catch-all kapara? The seir mishtaleach la'azazal, the goat that is sent off the cliff on Yom Kippur. That goat atones for everything. It's a catch-all kapara. So says the Gemara. Now the Mishnah seems a bit redundant. Why? Because the Mishnah says, Hainu kalos, the Gemara says, Hainu kalos, Hainu aseh velo saseh. So what are kalos? Kalos refers to regular mitzvos, aseh and lo saseh, positive commandments and prohibitions. Chamuros, what do chamuros refer to? Hainu krisos and misos bezdin. That refers again to kares, bearing infractions, and misos bezdin. Hoda, you knew about it. Hainu mezid. Lo hoda, I didn't know about it. Hainu shogeg. So I'll say, so the question the Gemara is asking over here is just the phraseology of the Mishnah appears to be fundamentally redundant. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, no, Haki Kamar. This is what it means to say. And I will say, this is a pivotally important Gemara. Listen to this. Haki Kamar, Ashar Avera Shabbatorah. In general. So I will say, so up until now, our Mishnah has been talking about Averos. But what kind of Averos? What kind of Averos? What we call Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav. That's the specific type of Avera that we have been discussing. Now the Gemara transitions, the Mishnah transitions, for all other Averos, right? Besides, so remember, Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav, we've got that covered. What is that covered by? Sir Rosh Chodesh, Sir of the Regalim, Sir Abifnim of Yom Kippur. Each of those atone for different types of Tumah. Now for all other Averos, and what does all other Averos include? Literally, all other Averos. What takes care of that? Bein kalos, bein chamuros. Whether again what we'll call kalos, lighter Averos, chamuros, more intense Averos, bein sha'asan b'shogeg, bein sha'asan b'mezid. Whether you did those kalos or chamuros, b'shogeg or b'mezid, osan sha'asan b'shogeg. And when in the realm of shogeg, bein nodal sveko, bein nodal sveko. Sometimes I commit an accidental Avera, and I know exactly what I did, and sometimes I don't know what I did. Whether Gemara says, Ve'eloin kalos, and what are the kalos? Aseh velo saseh. So what are examples of kalos? So a kalos, what we call an avera kala, is your typical aseh velo saseh. And I will say now, obviously there's still averos, but right, I eat something not kosher. I go ahead and I wear shatnez. I failed to put tzitzis on, right? Tzitzis on my garment. So again, those are examples of just everyday aseis and los aseis. Furthermore, ve'eloin chamuros, what are the more intense, right? The Gemara says, that's krisos umisos bezdin. That's infractions that carry with them a penalty of kares and misas bezdin. So we'll say, so now essentially what the Mishnah just informed us, and this is really incredible, we'll have to obviously drill down into this, is that the seir mishtaleach la'azazal, the seir that is sent out, right, sent over the cliff, that seir is so powerful that it atones for everything. For everything. Now what's interesting to see is, despite the fact that it atones for everything, what do you see? Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav is still in its own category enough that it requires its own atonement, right? Isn't this interesting? Every other Avera that you could think of is taken care of by the Sir Mishtaleach, with the exception of Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. Right? So again, if I enter into the Mikdash in a state of Tumah, I consume Kadshav in a state of Tumah, those type of infractions require their own kapara mechanism, but literally, everything else in Yiddishkeit is taken care of by the Seir HaMishtaleach. Incredible, incredible. So the Gemara now drills down a little bit into this. Hayaseh, Heichidami. So I'll say, when we say, this is incredible, when we say that this Seir, right, and this is the Seir HaMishtaleach, now remember again, Yom Kippur, 2 goats, right, 2 goats. Seir HaMishtaleach, that's the goat that's thrown over the cliff, and what's the other one? Sir Hana'aseh Bifnim. What is the Sir Hana'aseh Bifnim? What does the inner goat take care of? What does it take care of? Right, give you a hint, we just did it 30 seconds ago. Right, excellent. Right, so again, so remember that is the Seir that atones for intentional violation of Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. Right, the Sir Hana'aseh Bifnim, that's what that takes care of. Sir Mishtaleach takes care of everything else. Everything else. Okay, so now the Gemara says, by the way, so let's talk about this just a second. You say the Sir Mishtaleach takes care of mitzvos aseh. Mitzvos aseh. So the Gemara says, Hayaseh hechidami. What's the case of the aseh? So I remember again, just a simple idea. I failed to put on tefillin. That's a case of an example of I failed to perform an aseh. I didn't put on tzitzis. That is the example. I failed to perform an aseh. So okay, so the Seir takes care of that. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? Hayaseh hechidami. What's the case of the aseh? So the Gemara says, listen to this. Idalo avad tshuva zevach Hashem to'iva. So I don't understand. If I didn't do tshuva, so let's say again, I didn't put on tefillin, I didn't put on tzitzis, and I didn't do tshuva. So if that's the case, who cares about the Sir Mishtaleach zevach Rishayim to'iva? So the Gemara says, what good is a carbon without tshuva? Carbon is not hocus pocus. Right? Carbon doesn't take away all of your problems. Carbon still requires tshuva. So in other words, if I failed to perform an aseh, or for that matter, violated a los aseh, if I'm just bringing a carbon, that the Gemara that's called zevach Hashem to'iva. That is called the offering of the wicked is an abomination. Well, so that's a pretty strong statement. The Gemara says, okay, so what's the other possibility? Ida avid tshuva. So the Gemara is suggesting is, how could the Sir Mishtaleach, how could it be mechaper for asehs if I haven't done tshuva? Listen to this. Eat the other tshuva, and if I did tshuva, this is how beautiful this is. Kol yoma nami. If I did tshuva, then guess what? I don't need to wait. I don't need Yom Kippur. I don't need the Seir, right? If I didn't, in other words, even if I didn't, if I did do tshuva, tshuva works every single day. Look at Rashi. V'ida avid tshuva, last Rashi in the daf. Lama li Yom Kippurim. Wow, boss! Look at that phrase. If I did tshuva, who needs Yom Kippur? Who needs Yom Kippur? Kol yoma nami tshuva mechapra alei. Every day tshuva is mechaper for me. Tisanya lo zaz misham achem ochalin lo. The power of tshuva, specifically on a lower level infraction, like violation of an aseh, is just to tshuva. Just pause here for just a second. This is, by the way, one of the most incredible things about doing the daf first thing in the morning. Because often what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is he gives us the messages we need for that day. So look what HaKadosh Baruch Hu just whispered in our ear. Shefala, you did something wrong? Just do tshuva. Just do tshuva. Who needs Yom Kippur if you have tshuva? Who needs Yom Kippur if you have tshuva? So I did something wrong, why wait? I will say, so often in life, we go ahead and we do things wrong, right? All the times in life we do things wrong. The challenge in life is not that we do things wrong, right? To err is human, right? As was said. We all make mistakes. So what's the challenge? We get this wrong. We think the challenge is that I sin. The challenge is not that I sin. The challenge is that I don't fix my mistakes in the immediate aftermath of the performance of those mistakes. That's where my colossal failures in life come from. That I sin, I'm a human being, I'm gonna sin every day, I'm gonna continue to sin, to sin, I'm probably gonna become the best sinner. That's gonna be the way life is. My avoda in life is, after I sin, clean up your mess. Clean up your mess. Why do we wait to rectify the mistakes? Why do we wait to clean up the mess? Why do we wait until some later date to fix all the stuff that's broken? The Gemara says, tshuva is every single day. And tshuva is so powerful, I don't need Yom Kippur. I could just do tshuva today. So incredible. So the Gemara says, so we're just trying to figure out the mechanics. If we're talking about Nasei, so then again, if I didn't do tshuva, then why should the seir help? If I did tshuva, then I don't need Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, "Disanya Avram mitzvah saseh va'asa tshuva." If I violated a mitzvah saseh and then I did tshuva, lazaz misham ad shemochel lo. Ultimately, that literally translated it means I don't move from there until Hashem forgives you. Shevuos say, now this is interesting. This is part of a much bigger discussion, but the discussion the Gemara is having over here, the Maseches Yuma, Gemara is having over here is that there are certain averos for which you can attain instantaneous kapara, instantaneous forgiveness. So lower grade averos, again, I didn't put on tefillin today. Violation of a mitzvah, say positive commandments, which obviously the violation of a positive commandment is less severe than the violation of a prohibition. How do you violate a positive commandment? How do you do that? It's inaction. So obviously a sin of inaction is going to be less severe than a sin of dynamic activity. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says in the tshuva model, so you could essentially attain instantaneous kapara for the violation of a positive commandment. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, just do tshuva. I don't even need Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, so what's the case? This is incredible. Amar Rabbi Zera, top of Yud Gimel, will say, Ba'omed b'merdo v'rebihi. No, what's the case? They will say, get ready for this. This is going to be, to me, this actually what we're about to do is one of my favorite sugyas in all of Shas. And Amirat Hashem, we're going to have time because actually the Gemara moves quickly. I don't move quickly, but the Gemara does move quickly. We're going to see the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, which is going to be absolutely amazing. So listen to this. What's the case? The case over here is, I'll call him Ruvain, right? Ruvain goes ahead and he comes to Yom Kippur and he's Omeid b'mardo. I will say, what does Omeid b'mardo mean? Omeid b'mardo means is he's not about Tshuva. Ruvain committed an Aveira and he has not done Tshuva. And he's holding fast, right? He's holding strong in his Aveira kite. Rashi says, Omeid b'mardo, the law of a Tshuva. The Dikash lecha zevach hasham toiba mastis and Rebbe the Amar Yom Kippur mechaper al sheinon shavin. Okay, so let's say now watch this. What's the case? The case of our Mishnah. So remember again, keep our eye on the ball over here. What does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says that comes Yom Kippur, the seir la'azazal, which is the seir thrown off the cliff, atones for all averos. So Gemara says, whose opinion is this? So first of all, the Gemara is setting up the context is someone who has committed averos has not done tshuva. And yet the Mishnah still says, even though, again, Ruvain didn't do tshuva, Yom Kippur is still mechaper for him. Whose opinion is that? That's Rebbe. What does Rebbe say? Rebbe will say, get ready for it. Get ready for it. Desanya, Rebbe Omer, Akal averos shebetorah. On any avera that you'll find in the Torah, bein asa tshuva, bein lo asa tshuva, whether you did tshuva or whether you didn't do tshuva, Yom HaKippurim mechaper. Yom Kippur atones. The power of Yom Kippur is so overwhelming and so sweeping that even if you did not do tshuva at all, even if you are the worst avarian in the world, even if you committed averos that are chiyav misas bezin, chiyav kares, Yom Kippur is mechaper for everything. Now, even according to Rebbe's model, there are three exceptions to this rule. What are the three exceptions? Chutz miporek ol. Rashi says kofar be'eker, if you deny the existence of God. Okay. Makes sense, right? If you're a kofar, be'eker, your Yom Kippur doesn't atone for you without shuvah. Megala panim b'Torah. This is very interesting. Rashi says, Megala panim b'Torah, ba'al divrei Torah b'chutzpah u'begilui azus panav. I will say this is incredibly important. A person is disparaging about Torah. Person disparaging about Torah. And I will say, unfortunately, there is a Yetzer Hara like this, where a person sees something, that they don't understand, sees something that seems that they don't necessarily agree with, sees something that seems to fly in the face of whatever our contemporarily held isms are, and a person is disparaging about Torah. That is a terrible, terrible infraction, and ultimately, again, is unforgivable even on Yom Kippur. And next, umefer bris babasar, or a person negates bris. Now, the way this is understood generally is in one of two ways. Either a person doesn't perform the mitzvah of bris milah, or a person tries to hide his bris. Tries to make himself look uncircumcised. So by the way, it's interesting. So just understand what Rebbe just said. Rebbe said the power of Yom Kippur is so profound that Yom Kippur is mechaper for everything. Right? Even if you did not do tshuva, you fill in the Aveira, the power of Yom Kippur is so intense that Yom Kippur atones for everything. The Gemara Maseches Yoma phrases this as Itzumo Shel Yom Mechaper. That's how Rebbe's quoted in Maseches Yoma. The essence of the day provides atonement. Doesn't matter what your Avera is. But even Rebbe says 3 exceptions. What are the 3 exceptions? Again, you're a kofar b'ik, you don't believe in God, you're disparaging of Torah, and you deny bris milah. Rebbe say it makes sense because remember again, the denial of all of those 3 things, what's the commonality over there? They're part of the fundamental underpinning of the covenantal relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. If you don't believe in God, there's nothing to talk about, right? If I don't believe in the sanctity of Torah, even if I don't understand it, there's nothing to talk about. Bris Milah represents the idea. What is Bris Milah in its essence? My desires come second, ultimately again, to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. If I don't have that, then at the end of the day, there's no relationship. If there's no relationship, then you cannot tap into the power of Yom Kippur. But I will say, but this is Rebbe. To me, this is one of the most astounding shitos in all of Shas. In all of Shas. So just understand what this means, right? You eat your Sudim Afsekes. You say, that was delicious. That was delicious. You go to sleep. You say, you know what? I'm really not a good faster. So what do? You wake up for Havdalah on Matzah Yom Kippur. Right? Mamash like a bacher, right? Right? You go to sleep 24 hours, right? Fantastic. You wake up refreshed, ready to build the sukkah, ready to take on the world, right? You didn't daven, now you fast. Rebbe says, shkoyach. Shkoyach. How do you feel? Hope you feel like 1,000,000 pounds lighter because you have been cleansed. You didn't daven, you didn't open up a machzor, you didn't do anything. Rebbe says it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter. You didn't say one vidui, itzumo shel yom mechaper. The day itself, it cleanses. All you need to do essentially for Yom Kippur is be alive throughout the day, and you have achieved atonement for every single Aveira. You did tshuva, you didn't do tshuva, it doesn't make a difference. Itzumo shel mechaper. Again, with 3 exceptions. Now watch this. So the Gemara says as follows. So my time with Rebbe, so therefore, what the Gemara wants to suggest, just to understand, just to tie this back, the Gemara is suggesting Rebbe is the author of our Mishnah. Because what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said that the Seir HaMishaleach, right, the goat of Yom Kippur, which essentially is the Avot of Yom Kippur, atones for everything. Whose opinion is that? That's Rebbe. My time with Rebbe. What's Rebbe's thought? Where does Rebbe get that from? Right, that the day atones even if a person doesn't do anything. The Sanya ki devar Hashem biza. The pasuk says ultimately again that he's talking about the Gemara is really asking over here. How does Rebbe know that there are 3 exceptions to the atonement power of Yom Kippur? So first of all, the pasuk says ki devar Hashem biza. He disparaged the word of God. Zeh haporik all. This refers to someone ultimately who's a kofar be'ikar umegala panim batorah. And also is disparaging of Torah. That's mitzvah sohefar, and he has ultimately negated the mitzvah. Zehamefer bris bebasar. Ultimately, again, this is a person who negates bris milah. Again, either by not performing the mitzvah or by trying to hide his bris milah. He kares tikares. He will be cut off. He kares lifnei Yom Kippurim. Ultimately, again, he could suffer kares before Yom Kippur, tikares la'achar Yom Kippurim, and he could even get kares after Yom Kippur, which shows that Yom Kippur does not atone for such an individual. In other words, he kares before Yom Kippur, kares after Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur does not atone for such an individual. Now remember, all of this is talking about Rebbe's model of Yom Kippur atoning without any tshuva. So now Rebbe will tell us Yom Kippur atones for every single mitzvah, every single avera, even without tshuva, with these 3 exceptions. Yochel afilu asa tshuva. You might have thought that even if a person does tshuva, you still can't atone for these 3 averos. Talmud lomar avona ba. Therefore, the pasuk says his sin is within him. Lo amarti ella bisman sha'avona ba. No. The only time that a person chas v'shalom suffers kares is when he hasn't done tshuva. Obviously, Rabbi said the power of tshuva is that tshuva could wipe out everything, right? Tshuva could atone for everything. Sometimes you need things in addition to tshuva, but tshuva by itself could do everything. So even for these 3 major averos, tshuva of course helps. But again, whereas Yom Kippur itself, itzumo shel yom mechaper, the day atones for everything. By all other averos, these three averos, Yom Kippur is not enough. You need tshuva. V'Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan do with this? He karis ba'olam hazeh, he karis li'olam haba. The Rabbanan darshan is that these three averos are so severe that they have repercussions both in this world and the next. Avona ba, his sin is within him. What does this mean? Shim asa tshuva umeis misa memarakes. So both sides, the Rabbanan understand this to be part of a different type of construct, which is that there are certain averos that are so severe that tshuva by itself does not work, but rather you need tshuva and misa and death. And those two things together ultimately atone. So that's what they suggest by these three averos of Kofer, Be'ekar, Magala, Baramatorah, Mefer, Bris, that again, if you do tshuva and death, fully atone for it. Umi Matzah Sobo says, Sefer good. Sefer, if we pause for just a moment, tremendous accomplishment. Whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect? It reflects the view of Rebbe. It's Rebbe, and therefore halacha l'maaseh again. That's why the Mishnah says that the Sir HaMishtalech, which represents the essence of Yom Kippur, ultimately is mechaper for all averos. Good. Now the Gemara challenges that. Umi matzis mukmus. I just want to point out, by the way, that so this is a fundamental machlokes. The Gemara doesn't say it explicitly, but the Rabbanan disagree with Rebbe. Right, the Rabbanan disagree, and the Rabbanan say that Yom Kippur only atones if what? If accompanied by tshuva. So ultimately, again, so the way this machlokes is often phrased is Rebbe holds itzumo shel yom mechaper, the day itself affects atonement without tshuva, and the Rabbanan say no, itzumo shel yom is not mechaper, only tshuva with yom, only tshuva. Ultimately, again, with Yom Kippur allows for atonement. The Lubavitcher Rebbe in Likutei Sichos has a very interesting idea over here. He says no. He says, everyone agrees, itzumo shel yom mechaper. Everyone agrees with that. Because that's the whole essence of Yom Kippur. That Yom Kippur, the day itself, provides kapara. The Rebbe posits that the machlokes here is, what do you need to do to unlock the power of Itzumo Shel Yom? How do you access the power of Yom Kippur? So the Rabbanan will say, tshuva is the key. Right? Of course, Yom Kippur. In other words, the way the Rebbe says it makes so much sense, because that's the whole. Of course, everybody agrees. Itzumo Shel Mechaper. That's the whole idea that there's an essence of Yom Kippur, of the day itself, that goes in the tones. How do you unlock like that cathartic power? So the Rabbanan will say tshuva unlocks it. But tshuva works all year. But remember again, Abosai, we know, this is the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, that Tshuva has a different power during Aseret Simei Tshuva, and specifically on Yom Kippur. That's why the Rambam quotes the pasuk, Dirshu Hashem Bihi Matz'o. The Rambam says this explicitly, whereas you could go ahead and do Tshuva throughout the entire year, there is a special power of Tshuva during Aseret Simei Tshuva, with that even being highlighted on Yom Kippur itself. So the Rabbanan say, that's the key. Rebbe says the key to unlocking Itzumo Shel Yom is simply breathing, being alive. As long as you are alive, you access Itzumo Shel Yom. So just a different way to frame the machlokes. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Umi matzis mukmus la Rebbe. I will say, okay, one last, no, fine. It's a good idea. Umi matzis mukmus la Rebbe. So I don't understand, how can you set up the Mishnah like Rebbe? How does that work? V'hami the Sefer Rabbi Huda the Sefer at the end of the Mishnah is Rabbi Huda. Therefore, Reishanam Rabbi Huda. So we'll say. So in general, remember again, the way we like to frame things is to create authorship that runs consistently throughout a Mishnah. So if we know that the Sefer is Rabbi Huda, wouldn't it make more sense to make the Reish like Rabbi Huda as well? Tiktani Sefer, because what do we learn at the end of the Mishnah? Echad Yisrael ve'echad Kohanim ve'echad Kohen Mashuach. We'll see this in Amud Beis, right? So remember again, the end of the Mishnah says both Yisraelim, Kohanim, even Kohen Gadol are all able to achieve Kapara on Yom Kippur. Uman Isle Hai Svara, who holds this, right? Now, we'll say, now remember, so this is the opinion that says all Jews achieve atonement through the Siyar Mishtaleach. Now we're going to see this machlokes in the right machlokes about maybe Kohanim get atonement through different mechanisms. Who is the opinion that says Siyar Mishtaleach works for everyone? So the Gemara says, Uman Isle Hai Svara, Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda. Now, if it's Rabbi Huda at the end of the Mishnah, Michlal Dereisha Rabbi Huda, it makes sense that the beginning part, which is really the part that we're focusing on, that Siyar Mishtaleach takes care of all Averos. It would make more sense to say that that's Rabbi Huda also. Rabbi Yosef says, no, you're right. Rabbi the Savarlak Rabbi Huda. Really, the author of the Mishnah is Rabbi, but Rabbi holds like Rabbi Huda. Okay, Beautiful. That is a good answer. That is a good answer. The Gemara says as follows. Amar Rav Yosef, good. The Gemara says, Amar le Abaye. So Dafka Kamar. So Abaye says, okay, so can you explain that to me? So how does this work? So the Gemara says, Dafka Kamar Mar, Rabbi Savarlak Rabbi Huda. Ava Rabbi Huda lo Savarlak Rabbi. Odila med Rabbi Savarlak Rabbi Huda. Af Rabbi Huda Savarla Nami Kerebi. So now Abaye just asks, by the way, what does that mean? So you've just set up that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Huda, which again, I will say all that means is that Rebbe holds that Sira Mishtaleach, like Rabbi Huda, that Sira Mishtaleach atones for everyone. Yisraelim, Kohanim, even the Kohen Gadol. So when we say that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Huda, does that also mean that Rabbi Huda holds like Rebbe? Now what does that mean? What is Rabbi Huda's model of Yom Kippur? Does Rabbi Yehuda subscribe to the Rebbe model of Yom Kippur, namely Utsumo Shal Yom Mechaper, that the essence of the day just by itself is Mechaper? Does he agree with that or not? So the Gemara says, O Dilma, mid Rebbe Savarla Rabbi Yehuda, Av Rebbe Savarla Nami Rebbe. I'm sorry. O Dilma. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Dafka Kamar, Rabbi Savarlak Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Huda lo Savarlak Rabbi. So are we saying that Rabbi holds like Rabbi Huda, but maybe Rabbi Huda doesn't hold like Rabbi? Oh Dilma, may the Rabbi Savarlak Rabbi Huda, af Rabbi Huda Savarla Nami Karebi. Or maybe in the same way that Rabbi holds like Rabbi Huda also holds like Rabbi. Mihu archa de milsa katani lemeimar de Talmud Savarlak Rabbi. Remember again, Rabbi Huda is Rebbe's Rebbe. So therefore, again, just the way it's appropriate to say it is that the student holds like the Rebbe, not that the Rebbe holds like the student. But in reality, Rabbi Huda agrees with Rebbe's understanding of Yom Kippur as well. Amrale in Dafka Kamina. No, I meant it the way I said it. Rebbe Savarlak Rabbi Huda, Ava Rabbi Huda lo Savarlak Rebbe. No. In fact, it doesn't go both ways. Rebbe holds like Rabbi Huda, namely that the Sir Mishtaleach atones for all Yidden, right? Kohanim, Yisraelim, Leviim, Mamzerim, right? Whoever it is, Kohen Gadol, right? Every Jew has kapara ultimately through Sir Mishtaleach, but Rabbi Huda does not hold like Rebbe, which means that Rabbi Huda does not hold Itzumo Shal Yom Mechaper, but rather Rabbi Huda is going to hold like the Rabbanan, namely that halacha l'maisa, you need tshuva in order to access the power of Yom Kippur. Desanya, here we go. Yom Kippur Mechaper al Sham al She'enam Shavim. You might have thought that Yom Kippur should be Mechaper on a person, whether they did tshuva or not. So the Gemara says, and I can make a kavachomer, but dinhu. Now let's make a comparison. For example, chatas and asham. Chatas and asham create kapara, and Yom Kippur creates kapara. Ma chatas v'asham in mechaprin ela ala shavim. Just like chatas, now say if a person brings a chatas and asham, or say a person performs an aveira, brings a carbon, but doesn't do tshuva. What's the impact of that carbon? What's the impact of the carbon? Zero. That's what we call before zevach rishaim ta'iva. The offering of rishaim is an abomination. So the Gemara says, "So ma chatas asham ein mechaprin ela shavim." Just like chatas and asham only work if accompanied by tshuva. Af Yom Kippurim ein mechaper ela ala shavim. So to Yom Kippur only provides atonement for those who do tshuva. Shabbos says, so this is the position of Rabbi Huda. That Allah said, and this is like the Rabbanon. It's like the Rabbanon. The power of Yom Kippur is only accessed with tshuva. Ma lachatas va'asham shein mechaperin al hamezid kishogeg. Shabbos says, so ultimately we could just say back, but here's the problem. Chatas and asham are only mechaper on shogeg. Right? Remember again, there's no carbon for. It's interesting. There's no carbon for an intentional avera. Now, the truth is, it's not totally true. There is a carbon for intentional avera. What carbon is that? That's the sir hana'aseh b'fnim on Yom Kippur. But that's not something I'm bringing. That's something that is brought on behalf of Klal Yisrael. I can say just like Chatas and Asham are only mechaper on Shogeg, right? The Gemara says, Tomar Yom Kippurim shemechaper ala mezid k'shogeg. Ultimately, again, I can say that Yom Kippur, however, is different because Yom Kippur has the ability to mechaper both from mezid and shogeg. Hoilu mechaper al hamezid k'shogeg, yechaper al shavim ba'al she'enam shavim. So if that's the case, that Yom Kippur can be mechaper for shogeg and mezid, perhaps Yom Kippur can be mechaper even whether you did tshuva or not. Talmud lomar ach. Therefore, the pasuk says ach. Ach ba'asar lachodesh. Ach, Rabbi say usually is a chilik, right? Means to distinguish, which means some things are included, some things are excluded. To teach me that what? that Yom Kippur has the ability to atone for those who do tshuva, but not for those who do not do tshuva. So both say good. Now, interestingly enough, this brisa is being quoted in a way to highlight the opinion of Rabbi Huda, to show that Rabbi Huda doesn't hold like Rabbi, and Rabbi Huda holds that halacha l'maaseh Yom Kippur only works together with tshuva. The problem is, if you look at this brisa is without attribution. Right, there's no name here. To which the Gemara says, not a problem. Stam sifra money. Shavuos say this is a sifra. Sifra is a brisa, really chelik of medrash actually, but really brisa that we call Toras Kohanim. So a stam sifra and Toras Kohanim. Who is it? Rabbi Huda. The kavar shavim in, lo shavim lo. Ultimately, what do you see from here? So we attribute this to Rabbi Huda. And what do we see from this brisa? What do we see from it? We see from it that Yom Kippur only works if you do tshuva. But Yom Kippur does not work if you don't do tshuva. So therefore, again, to kind of bring this full circle, therefore, Rebbe holds like Rabbi Huda, namely that the Ser Mishtaleach atones for everyone, for everything. But yet Rabbi Huda does not hold like Rebbe, because whereas Rebbe holds Itzumi Yoshem Mechaper, that ultimately, again, Yom Kippur is Mechaper for all Averos, even without tshuva. Rabbi Yehuda holds that Yom Kippur is only mechaper with tshuva. Incredible. So the Gemara says, "V'rami stam sifra astam sifra." But again, I can bring another stam sifra, right? There's another stam, what we call stam sifra, which means a bryce from Toras Kohanim. This Sanya we learned, Yochol lo yehei Yom Kippur mechaper, ela imkin his anabo v'kara mikra kodesh v'lo asa b'malacha. Supposed to listen to this. This is just wild. I might have thought that Yom Kippur can only be mechaper, listen to this, if you fasted, or karabo mikra kodesh, right? You davened, right? V'lo asaba malacha, you didn't do malacha, you didn't violate it. How do I know? Lo hisanaba. Supposed to get ready for this. How do I know that even if I didn't fast on Yom Kippur, lo kara mikra kodesh, I didn't daven on Yom Kippur, v'asaba malacha, I violated, I did malacha on Yom Kippur, minayin. How do you know that Yom Kippur is still mechaper? I will say, is this not the craziest thing you've ever read? When I say crazy, like I mean amazing. In other words, how do I know that even if I didn't fast on Yom Kippur, I didn't daven on Yom Kippur, I did malacha on Yom Kippur, how do I know that Yom Kippur is mechaper? Talmud lomar, Yom Kippurim hu mikol makom. So everyone say the pasuk says Yom Kippurim hu. Yom Kippurim, it's an absolute day, no matter. When you read a brisa like this, doesn't it make you want Yom Kippur right now? Right now. Oh my gosh, I could use that cleansing absolutely right now. The power of this to just wipe everything clean. I do, I don't do, it doesn't matter. Say from Mikamok, so what do you do with this? So what do you do with this sifra? So again, I just want to point out, so therefore we have two brises from Toras Kohanim that fundamentally contradict each other. Right? The first brisa says, Yom Kippur literally only works if you do tshuva. Second brisa says, the second brisa is even more severe. Second brisa says, even if you violated Yom Kippur, right? You ate on Yom Kippur, you did malacha on Yom Kippur, you didn't fast, right? You didn't daven, still Yom Kippur is mechaper. So what do I do with this? Which is, Rabbi, no, that's not a contradiction. Ha Rebbe, but Rabbi Huda. Again, now it's fine. It works. It's reflecting, I will say, these two brises reflect the two fundamentally opposite opinions, not opposite, but different opinions about the way Yom Kippur works. The first brisa that says you need tshuva, that's Rabbi Huda. How do you access the now again, everyone agrees that Yom Kippur has this tremendous tidal wave of spiritual cathartic energy to fundamentally cleanse you, change you, uplift you, wipe the slate clean. The Rabbanan say yes, but you need tshuva to access it. That's the first brisa. Second brisa, that even if you're eating on Yom Kippur, can you imagine this? You're eating on Yom Kippur, and yet Yom Kippur is still atoning for you. Yom Kippur is still atoning for you. Right? You're doing malach on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is still atoning. Who's that? That's Rebbe. Rebbe says, Itzumo shel yom mechaper. Now, you might say to yourself, that makes no sense. How does it make any sense that if you're eating on Yom Kippur, doing malach on Yom Kippur, that Yom Kippur is still working on your behalf? I will say, love doesn't make sense. And the Rebbe Shalom loves us so much. He loves us. There's a phrase like this, right? Rashi HaKadosh brings down. I don't know if it's Rashi's or it's the Gemaras. Maybe it's the Gemaras. It's the Gemaras, right? Ava mekalkel es hashura. Love disrupts the natural order of things, right? Where do we learn that from? From Avram Avinu. The pasuk says, "Vayash came Avram baboker, vayachavosh es chamaro." Avram Avinu got up early by the Akedah, got up early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey. Right? So it was bothering the Gemara is Avram Avinu he's got a guy for that, right? Every Jew has a guy to saddle his donkey, right? They don't do that ourselves, right? So why is Avram Avinu going and saddling his donkey? Because again, Rashi says, Mark says, Ava Makalkas Ashur, love. Avram Avinu's love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, love for his son, disrupted the natural order. Love makes people do crazy things. And love is such a strong emotion that often intellect is dispensed with. And alachas kama v'kama, when you're talking about the love that Hashem has for his children, there is nothing stronger in the universe than that love that Hashem has for us. So why does Yom Kippur work? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us so much and wants more than anything for the slate to be cleaned, for us to have a new start, that it's illogical. It's illogical. So literally, again, Ruvain is fressing on Yom Kippur. Don't worry, the food has 4 hashkachas, right? But he's fressing on Yom Kippur. He's doing malacha on Yom Kippur. Chash Baruch Hu's literally, it's okay, right? Atonement, forgiveness. Avo mekalkalas ashura. The love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us is so intense that it disrupts the natural order of anything. Rava Amarava says, no. Hava Rebbe. Both could be Rebbe. Umod Rebbe bekares diyoma. Now, listen to this. So this is fascinating. So the Gemara says as follows. So both prices could be Rebbe, right? Why? Because maybe even Rebbe agrees that what? That if you violate Yom Kippur itself, Yom Kippur can't atone for you without tshuva, right? Even Rebbe who holds itzumo shal yom mechaper, right? Even Rebbe will say, but if you violate Yom Kippur, you need to do tshuva in order to affect the cathartic power of Yom Kippur. Because if not, if you don't say that, the Gemara says, tilotei mahachi karis Yom Kippur the Rebbe Lesley. I will say, here, this is fascinating. What's the halacha? I will say the halacha is if you eat on Yom Kippur, what's the halacha? It's a chiyuv kares. If you do malacha on Yom Kippur, what's the halacha? Chiyuv kares. If Rebbe holds itzumo shal yom mechaper, that the day itself atones, then what? Then there's never a chiyuv kares for Yom Kippur violation because the day atones for itself. But yet the Torah says that you're chayiv kares for violation of Yom Kippur. So it must be that even according to Rebbe, who says itzumo shal yom mechaper, that applies to everything but the 3 averos that we enumerated above, and Yom Kippur violation itself, right? In other words, if you violate Yom Kippur cannot atone for you, right? Or I should say, Yom Kippur cannot atone for you by itself. You're going to need tshuva as well. So the Gemara says, but why not? The Gemara says, I can still find the case of kares on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Mishkachas kigon da'avad balayla umis. Now you could have a case of, let's say, for example, let's say again, a person eats at night, right? Comes Yom Kippur night, a person eats, and what happens? He died before daybreak. In that case, the lo asa yamama l'chapurele. In that case, ultimately, again, he did not avail himself of. It's interesting. The Gemara's understanding over here that when we say itzumo shayom mechaper, it's actually the daytime of Yom Kippur that affects kapara, not the night. So you could have a case, ultimately, again, of a guy who just trying to find the case of kares for Rebbe of Yom Kippur, right? So again, you could have a guy who eats at night, dies before daybreak. So therefore, again, he never had the opportunity to tap into the kapara status of Yom Kippur. Ela ima, rather the Gemara says, Ela ima amud beis, kares diyamama l'Rebbe Lesley. That again, I both say, you're not going to find the case of daytime kares according to Rebbe. To which the Gemara says, Alama law, why not? Listen to this. Mishkachas law, the achal umsa v'chanke umis. You can find it in the following case. Ruvain ate something and he choked while he was eating and died. So as Rabbi says, so therefore what happened? There was never a moment of Yom Kippur after the act of eating to go ahead and provide kapara. Right? In other words, we're trying to figure out, according to Rebbe, how you could have a situation where Yom Kippur itself can't atone for the act of kares. So, for example, if a person is going out and eating, dies during the act of eating, in other words, in Rebbe's model, you would need a moment of Yom Kippur post-act of eating in order to atone. If he dies during the act of eating, there's no moment of Yom Kippur. Or, another Gemara gives another case, inami da'achol samach l'shkia sachama to lo hava shos l'chapurele. Rabbi said, this is very interesting. What happens if Ruvain people use the break between Musaf and Mincha in all different kinds of ways, right? So Rebbe decides to Reuven decides to sit down for a Su'udah, right? He begins to eat, and he eats all the way until Matzah Yom Kippur, right? Eats all the way until Matzah Yom Kippur. So in that case, again, what's come now in all of these cases? So again, halacha l'maisa, there was no moment of Yom Kippur after the act in order to atone. You see this, he literally translated, it means he starts eating by sundown of Yom Kippur, and eats all the way until Matzah Yom Kippur. Now, say to yourself, right? Say to yourself, out of all of the averos that a person could commit, right? Really, you're at sunset of Yom Kippur. You can't just wait a little bit. So I say, in general, just understand, one could say this about any avera, right? I committed an avera. Really, I couldn't hold out 30 seconds longer, because we know this. We know this concept that so many times the way that I could try to avoid sin, it's fun to bring this down, that sometimes a person is tempted by Yetzer Hara. Don't say you're not going to sin. Don't say you're not going to sin. Rather, what's a good strategy to employ? Say, you know what? I'm not going to sin for the next minute. And put it on a stopwatch, right? But I'm not sinning for the next 60 seconds. So I was saying, 9 out of 10 times, if a person employs that strategy, I will overcome the desire. Simply because we know this, that the way chet works is, I'm so caught up in the moment that all I see and all I want is that thing. But if I'm able to catch my breath a little bit and able to make a little bit of a dispassionate decision, what often happens is the ability to resist temptation. It's an incredible strategy. Don't say you're not going to sin, because you're probably going to fail, right? But say, I'm going to sin. No, I'm doing this, right? I am going to sin. I'm just waiting 1 minute, 2 minutes, right? But I'm waiting. I put on the stop. I'm waiting. We'll say it has tremendous abilities to save ourselves from such incredible mistakes. So I say, so often, if we could just control ourselves for just a few more moments, we could rein in those desires that seek to derail us. But all too often, we just give in to desire with such immediacy that there's no hope. So we look at this guy who's eating literally again at sundown of Yom Kippur. We say, what a fool. What a fool. You can't hold on for another couple of minutes until Matzah Yom Kippur. Shabbos says, so unfortunately, that's us so often in life. I can't hold out for just another minute or two until I'm able to get this Yetzer under control. If I could just hold out, just give myself a little bit of that pause, there's no telling what type of mistakes I could save myself from. So I'll say, that's the end of the sugya. How do we paskin? Actually, let's just a little bit more Gemara. All right, so we'll say, just understand, I left you on a cliffhanger over here. Machlokes Rebbe and Rabbanon. How does Yom Kippur work? How do we paskin? We'll come back in just a moment. We just got to cover a few more lines. So what's the next part of the Gemara? Was remember again, towards the end of the Mishnah, because we're going to finish the parak tomorrow. Mirz Hashem. Everyone is able to achieve atonement, ultimately again through this Seir Lazazel. Hagufa Kasha is inherent contradiction. Katani Echad Yisrael ve'Echad Kohanim ve'Echad Kohen Mashuach. So it doesn't make any sense. First you said everyone is in the same boat. Then you said, what's the distinction between a Yisrael Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol? Rabbi Yehuda, what it means to say, Echad Yisrael, ve'Echad Kohanim, ve'Echad Kohen Mashuach, miskapen b'sira mishtalech b'shar averos. All Jews, Yisraelim, Kohanim, even Kohen Gadol, are atoned through the Sir Mishtaleach, through this, right to the goat that's thrown over the cliff. Vein chiluk beinehen. There is no distinction between them. Ve'uma bein Yisrael kohanim u'lekohen mashuach. So, but are there any differences between Yisrael and Kohanim? Yes. Elo shapar mechaper ala kohanim al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Ultimately, again, I will say here is the fundamental distinction. Kohanim, when it comes to tumas mikdash v'kadashav, they are atoned for through the power of Yom Kippur. We Yisraelim are atoned for through the Seir Hana'aseh Bifnim. Umani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Yehuda Desanya, the Chipar As HaKodesh. Actually, we'll say no, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Rabbi Yehuda tomorrow, and tomorrow I will give you the resolution of Machlokes Rabbi and the Rabban about the essence of Yom Kippur. We'll see a beautiful Ram in Hilchos Shuvah. Shkoyach, everyone. All right, Chavranzim, have a great day, everyone.
This reminds me of the story about Rebbe in the newspaper. It's a newspaper writer, leftist newspaper.